back to Room 237 as I continue my marathon of Italian horror and giallo films. So my last several reviews have been giallo, so I figured why not mix it up and do a horror film. And this is one of the last ones I picked up, and it is by one of the maestros of Italian horror, Lucio Fulci. And it's one I've known about for a while, but haven't been able to pick up until recently. And it's one that's very mixed. People either love it or hate it. And it's 1982's Manhattan Baby. And of course, Blue Underground. They've had several different releases of this, including a 3-disc special edition. I just wanted to at least get the Blue Underground one. So it came out in 1982, the same year as New York Ripper, the year after he did Beyond, House by the Cemetery, and The Black Cat. And sadly, this is one of his weakest films. I don't feel too bad saying that because I know even Fulci himself dismissed this movie shortly after it came out. I know he's not a fan of it, as is his producer, which actually his producer Fabrizio De Angelis, who I think was a longtime producer on his films. They stopped working together after this, and it was actually either another one of his producers or a co-writer who was not a fan of it. It was his screenwriter Dardano Sacchetti, who also wasn't a fan of it. He collaborated with his wife, and it was originally going to be called The Evil Eye. And I have seen posters and foreign releases of this called Eye of the Evil Dead. And I knew I was in trouble when I first picked it up because it has Bob from House by the Cemetery. I don't know why this kid has been in as many movies as he's in. House by the Cemetery, this, Blade in the Dark, the very ending to Demons. I wouldn't say he's as bad in this as House by the Cemetery, but he's in it enough, and he's still pretty bad. Now it stars Christopher Connolly, Martha Taylor, Brigitte Baccioli, Giovanni Frezza, and Cynthia De Ponte, and one other guy who was actually Cosimo Cinieri, if I pronounce that correctly. He's credited as Lawrence Wells, but he was also in New York Ripper and Murder Rock. Now, I'm not... I would probably say I like this more than Demonia. I might even put The Black Cat above this. And if you follow my channel, you know I ranted on The Black Cat. I'm not a big fan of it. But that movie at least had good atmosphere to it. And this movie does too. Certain scenes, like the shots of Egypt do look very good. Whether it's actual Egypt or this other dimensional voyage land. It's pretty well shot, and it has atmosphere to it. But I guess this was intended to be Fulci's most expensive film. It was going to be this, sort of like a big Spielberg kind of film, at least for him, for I think it was like 800 million Italian lira, but at some point it was cut down. It was cut in half, and he had to make do with that, and it shows. I mean, a lot of the effects, even for 1982, are a bit shoddy. I mean, a lot of the optical effects, like the illumination or like the light beams, are very, you know, cheap even for 1982. The end finale with the taxidermy birds, I get they're allowed to look somewhat fake because they are taxidermied birds coming to life, but you can see the strings, and that really works in like an old Ed Wood movie or even some of the Universal films. But, you know, I didn't really have too high of expectations for this because I know in the 80s, even from what I've seen, from what I haven't seen, Fulci kind of went downhill. I mean, he does have good. Eh, yeah, it's not City of the Living Dead or The Beyond. It does feel like a bad sequel to The Beyond. It even has the same music. I mean, the music was done by Fabio Frizzi, who's done a lot of Fulci music. It has the main theme to The Beyond, and I think a couple other pieces. I could be wrong. If it's not the same piece, it sounds like they added to it. Like some of the notes are different. There is kind of a bigger, more open-ended section to the music. It's more like a Fulci Egyptian curse version of like Poltergeist, because it does involve a daughter somewhat becoming possessed or the channel of this evil, and they have to get an expert to come in and help. Their bedroom becomes this portal, or their closet becomes this portal to this other dimension. It's a lot like Poltergeist. Like Poltergeist meets The Beyond with a very cheap budget. I could say I dislike. I mean, it does have a lot of things that you can look forward to in a Fulci film. The gore, the blood and gore is very toned down. You don't really get any of that until the very end. But some of the technical aspects, like POV shots of various ways and degrees, some extreme close-ups or zooms or a shift in focus, so like someone here, something out of focus, and then it shifts so you can see what they're looking at. There were a couple decent shots, like the daughter Susie when she's laying in bed and her hand is like down at her side and the camera's like here, so it's like she's laying in bed but her hand is there. Smoke rises because it's like her hand's really hot and it's burning the blanket. But and the story, there's some things that don't really make sense, or maybe they do, but it just I don't know. But it opens up in Egypt, where I don't know if it was the whole family or just the father and daughter, but the father is a professor named George. He's played by Christopher Connolly. He's in Egypt, a professor of archaeology, and his daughter Susie who's played by what was it, Brigitte Baccioli, and he's there with his wife Emily, played by Martha Taylor. I don't think Bob, his name is Tommy in this, I'm just calling him Bob, was there, but he finds a scorpion and decides to bring it back for her. But he finds this tomb, and there's this symbol on the wall, like a typical Egyptian, it's got a triangle with the eye, some symbols. This blue beam comes out, hits him in the eyes, takes away his eyesight. His daughter's approached by this assumingly blind woman with white eyes, who I think put her under some sort of spell because like she was in a trance and she just put her money out. It was given this amulet that has the same symbol as the one in the tomb, which George, his guide, they fall through a thing and his guide lands face down on all these spikes. Not a lot of gore. But anyway, then they get back to Manhattan and she has this amulet. And pretty much their bedroom becomes the source of all this evil. I mean, there's deaths that occur, there's nightmares. It eventually puts her in like a coma where, well, she has a series of seizures, and then they have to get an expert to come and help retrieve her or get the evil to go somewhere else. And it's not terribly interesting. I was kind of watching it just so I could finish it and do a review. It's definitely not one of my favorite Fulci films. I would put it more at the bottom with like Demonia and The Black Cat from what I've seen so far. I consider Zombie 3 to be a Bruno Mattei film. But, you know, they have like a babysitter or a nanny named Jamie Lee. She eventually goes missing. The mother has this goofball co-worker who the first time we see him, he's wearing Groucho glasses, and then he's got like the slinky eye glasses. He has the can with the snakes. He disappears when he opens their door because she has him come over with her at one point. And then the children can disappear. That's where they call them voyages. A lot of scenes where Susie is walking around in the apartment or house, whichever it is. That's when we get the Beyond music. And it seems like there's like this one section of the wall that will like glow blue, even though she keeps the amulet either around her neck or in a drawer with the scorpion. But, you know, like at one point, the children, the two kids are locked in their bedroom. Babysitter can't get to them, so she calls the maintenance guy. And I will say this was a fairly suspenseful scene. Maintenance guy's in the elevator going up, and I think it says he's on like the 14th floor or whatever. It stops, so he tries prying it open, and like his fingernails are all bloody. But then the floor starts slipping out, and he just falls to his death. It's a very drawn out scene. I mean, with Fulci, that does happen. You do get scenes that kind of go on forever. That is one of them, but I feel like it held its suspense throughout. There are some goofy moments, like the first time we see Bob go into the other dimension, which is just the door glowing, and then he just kind of cheaply vanishes. Susie, there's like a close-up of her, and she's just... I don't know if that was to imply she's making it happen, or if she's like putting two and two together and just bad acting. But... so yeah, turns out they weren't locked in their bedroom, but the door is still unable to open. So that's when the mom has her coworker come over to help her open it. He opens it and he just disappears. And when it shows him in the barren wasteland, I thought he was already dead, because he's like laying there all gray. And if you look, you can kind of see his eyes twitching, but apparently that's the moment of his death from like dehydration. And basically the girl just keeps having more seizures or more nightmares, then slips into a coma. George does have one guy who is able to kind of give him information on who this amulet is supposed to represent. He kind of reminded me of like a cheap version of like Christopher Lee. Like I don't know why he just did. But at one point the babysitter takes a picture of the two kids, and there's a picture of Susie with the amulet, and I think they like drop it or something because this other woman picks it up, and eventually she's not in the picture but the amulet is. Almost looks like it's standing up on itself. So the woman writes this name on the picture, gives it back to the mother with this name, Adrian Mercado, who's the one played by Cosimo Cinieri. It seems like he's part of this other cult, or like he's a bad guy. Also, he just looks that way. He just looks evil as shit. But, he's the expert that tries to help. Oh, and of course, that first guy that was helping the dad, he gets bitten by a snake in his own office while he's looking at the picture. And I will say the animal sound effects are kind of laughable. Of course, it's all sound effects after the fact, but like the slithery snake effects are laughable. The scorpion effects is just a lot of crackling sounds. I've seen other Fulci films with stuff like that, but here it really stood out. There was a really good scene with this Mercado guy when Susie's in like a coma. He's asked to be left alone. And then George and Emily hear Susie scream, but when they go up into her bedroom, she's still asleep, and this Mercado guy is writhing on the floor, foaming and bloody, but with her voice coming out. And I thought that was a neat idea. That was interesting and fairly creepy. But then that's when he tells George that she's pretty much the energy source of this amulet and the evil Egyptian god that it embodies. But they take her to the hospital, and you get this long scene where this Mercado guy is looking at the amulet and it glows blue. You do get these cool shots of him looking at it all evilly, all blue and dark. Bob is standing at the wall at home just saying, "Please punish me." And I love the look of blood spatter. Actually working in blood spatter is like my dream job. I've had the red on white blood spatter artwork as my lock screen on my phone for like 7 years. So the spot on the wall that's white, we just see it just kind of filling up with red, and eventually this rotted hand falls out, which the kid just says, "Poor Jamie Lee." So she didn't make it back from her voyage. They even say she can't. And so then the girl, she flatlines, blood comes out of her mouth, but then she's fine. The Mercado guy tells the dad he's taken all the evil energy and is now out of his daughter, and the dad needs to drop the amulet in the river. That can help the Mercado guy. But instead, the sort of grand finale is his taxidermy birds come to life. And this went on for a while. Yeah, the gore scenes are fine. Oh, the gore effects on the rotted hand were very Fulci, so that was nice. But I mean, some of the shots, like the POV shots of the birds coming at him and pecking at him, those were fine. But his POV, where it literally looks like stiff birds on wires, he's trying to rip them apart, and he's pulling the hay and stuffing out of them, but they're still pecking him to death. It looks really cheesy. And I mean, yeah, you can have a little wiggle room with that because they are taxidermy birds. They can look a little fake. but this looked extremely cheap. So then finally it shows him dead on the floor, the birds back where they were, but some of their stuffing ripped out. And then it shows the dad dropping the amulet off the bridge into the river. Pan up to the sun, then transition to Egypt. Pan back so we can see that is the desert. And then we get the Hellraiser ending, even though this came out 5 years before Hellraiser, where that same blind woman is now selling the same amulet to this other girl, and it's just gonna keep going. I would say this went at a fair pace up until about the third act, and then I feel like it just kept going, kept getting dragged out, which is ironic because that's the act where more exciting things happen. But yeah, I definitely think this is one of Fulci's weakest films. In fact, I think a Murder Rock, which came out in '84, was the first film after this, miles ahead of this. I actually really enjoyed Murder Rock. I still need to see Enigma, but like this and Demonia, I would have to put down at the bottom. I would say I enjoyed The Black Cat more, only because I think that had more atmosphere going to it, or going for it. It didn't have as many annoying characters, or it just definitely seemed like a more, I don't want to say competent, but coherent film. So yeah, Manhattan Baby, definitely not one of Fulci's best. In fact, it's one of his weakest. Sad to say. I can see why he dismissed it shortly after it came out, and why he didn't work with his producer again. But I guess it's also known as The Possessed, not to be confused with the '65 film. But and this was also one of his final films to be released in America. I'm guessing because it did very poorly. But yeah, Fulci's Manhattan Baby. Waited years to see it. Even got the version I wanted. And it's not a very good movie. Definitely one of my least favorite Fulci films. But stay tuned for more Italian horror and giallo films. Thank you for watching.